I've always described projects like a clock face, and you start off at 12 o'clock with a great idea. You bring your experience to work on it through 3 o'clock, and then when you get to 6 o'clock, you've got your head in your hands, and I call that the dark night of the soul, when it's gone wrong on every possible level. And then you keep working on it, and around about 9 o'clock, it's competent. And the client would probably accept it at that point. But if you carry on between 9 o'clock and midnight, you get excellence. And it's that last quadrant, which might take 5 minutes or 5 years. But that is where the magic is, that last quadrant. And I've talked to lots of people about that, and they quite often agree with me. That happens on the projects.
Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork Podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Welcome back, everybody, to Verify in Field. Today we have Tony Wills, who is director at ButtonFix and a product designer, a career-long product designer. So I'm excited to have you on today, Tony.
Thank you.
Tony's out of England, out of the
England.
UK, right?
Right now I'm in Somerset in the west of England, but our offices are in London and our manufacturing is in Scotland.
Awesome. I think you might be the first guest from that's joined me on this podcast from England. So exciting to be able to go worldwide a little bit. So maybe to get started, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about just your career background, your journey in product design and how you came to ButtonFix.
Of course. It's a long journey because I am 70 now. So like all these things, they start when you're at school, and somebody had a great teacher who got me interested in making things, in woodwork in particular. And then I was fortunate to go to quite an academic school. But I was even more fortunate that halfway through that, they switched to a much bigger school, which was a combination of a kind of practical, technical school and a grammar school. So I had the benefit of both worlds. And I managed to get, just by pure luck, and a lot of this story is about luck, I managed to get one-to-one teaching, which you can't get in even the best schools. So I was very lucky with that. So after that, I had some bad advice to go and become a teacher, which I tried to do, and I did not enjoy that at all. So I quit that and went into industry, working for a furniture company, a laboratory furniture company, and then an acoustic panel company for mobile screens in recording studios. And I ran that by myself, just manufacturing everything at the age of 18, I suppose. And then onwards to plastic injection molding company. And then I thought one day there has to be more luck to life than this. So I decided I would go to art college, which did not make my father happy at all, because he'd been in the army and he thought that going to art college was just about one of the worst things I could do. Anyway, like a red rag to a bull, I decided to do that anyway. And he kind of disavowed me for a bit, and we got on okay in later years. But I went to an interview in Brighton, an art college there called Brighton Polytechnic, and I turned up on the wrong day for the interview. And I remember walking to the end of Brighton Pier thinking, this is the end of my career. I'm not going to be a designer. And then I came back, and fortunately for me, more luck, the head of the course, who'd had a few pints at lunchtime, interviewed me for 5 hours. So at the end of the 5 hours, he said, well, you'll be lucky. There's only one place left, and there are 10 people who want to do this course. It's a brand new course called Wood, Metal, Ceramics and Plastics. And I got the place. So I went to Brighton, and that was very lucky. I had a fantastic teacher there called Bert Marsh, who was a specialist in wood, And I used to turn up at 8 o'clock in the morning, which was very unusual for the art students. So he turned up at 10. So he taught me between the hours of 8 and 10. And I had one-to-one teaching, which was marvellous. And then at the end of that course, they wanted, because it was a new course, they wanted people to apply to the Royal College of Art, just about the best art college in the world. And I decided that I would do it, not because I wanted to go and live in London, but because I realised that in order to do the interview, I had to get everything ready 6 months early, and then I could go and lie on the beach. So it was out of laziness that I applied. And I got an interview, and there were 1,000 applicants for 10 places. And I got in. It was bizarre. So I managed to get into the Royal College of Art to study furniture for 3 years there. And it's only a 2-year course now, but it was a 3-year fully funded course then. So there was 30 people in 3 years, and fantastic education. But after that, I applied to share a workshop, 1,000 square feet workshop with another guy from a different art college. We started a business called TAG, the TAG Design Partnership. And that was great fun. We did that for 7 years. We didn't make much money. We had a lot of fun. And of course, when you run your own business, you learn more than you ever did in education. Probably learned more in the first 6 months than I'd learned in the last 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, actually. And that was great whilst it lasted. And then both he and I were headhunted by big architectural practices. So he was headhunted by a company called BDP, and I was headhunted by a company called DEGW, Duffy, Ely, Giffoni and Worthington. And a very kind man there called Colin Cave gave me a big sum of money and said, please set up a product design business for us. And he had the most amazing ability to take young people and trust them to do it. And he did. And I said, look, I'm not a managing director. And he said, no, you aren't, but you will be. And that was fantastic. So I did that for 7 years. And then the financial crisis hit. My senior designer and I, he was Brian Watson, and I got out. We set up our own practice called Wills, Watson and Associates. And we started working for clients doing office furniture. So we worked for a huge company called Shinarps in Sweden. And I don't think anyone really hears about them, but they, even when we were working for them, they were turning over €500 million. So we're a big company, and we designed products in the UK for them to manufacture in Sweden, which was excellent. And then we got a company called Grant Westfield in Scotland, who commissioned us to design commercial washrooms. So we designed lots and lots of washrooms. If anyone flies into Terminal 5 and washes their hands in Terminal 5 in Heathrow, they'll be washing their hands at what's called a wash station. And bizarrely, there are 1,007 wash stations in one terminal. So, and we designed all of those and set up the factory to make them. So I've always had 1 foot in design and 1 foot in manufacturing. And that's kind of, and then we branched out into medical devices. So we do medical devices as well. So Imperial College came to us and asked us to work on a device which keeps endoscopes clean when they're inside your inflated abdomen. Sounds like a million miles away from furniture design, but actually it's just very intense product design. Pretty much the same as furniture design. It's a different mechanical problem. It took us 5 years, but that product's now out there. So we do quite a lot of different things, but we specialise in products that professionals use or specify. So we don't tend to do things that end up in a high street shop window. So we know what we're good at. We understand how the professional thinker thinks.
Awesome. So, that's a very long and exciting path that you took. Many years as product design, many different types of products. I liked how you summed it up there at the end. Products that professionals use, not exactly direct to consumer products, I guess you could say, right? Which does make sense, paints a story of, about how you ended up with ButtonFix. And just for our listeners, I've been following Tony. He doesn't know this, for many, many years, his path with creating ButtonFix, which is a solution for panel fixing, right? The concealed fastener product. You've got a series of them now, type 1, type 2s, and now type 3s, with different ways of mounting concealed fasteners for panel hangings, for things like that. And so, but it's a product, and I always admired the way, not only the way that it was developed, but the way you guys presented yourselves, the way it was marketed, the way, not just the solution, but I come from an architecture background, and so a lot of times I'm in the U.S., you're in the U.K., but from my perspective in the U.S., especially in our industry in woodworking, everything is very, products are very marketed in a very simple, elementary, very rugged, like basic, hey, here's what it does, use it.
Mm-hmm.
And but I always found ButtonFix, not only has a pop of color, it's elegant. It wasn't like you guys stopped at, does it do the thing, but does it do it well, and is it appealing, does it look good? And so that's just my personal commentary on it, but
You're right.
you've painted a picture that now makes a lot more sense for context of how you came to develop this product, which is a product that professionals use to serve a purpose, right? And you also mentioned a couple of things that stood out to me. You did some work with injection molding.
Mm-hmm.
You did some work with medical products. You did some work with office design. So a lot of those things, I imagine, colored your ability and your interest in developing this product, would you say?
They did, but what's interesting is when you're a consultant designer for other people doing their products,
Right.
I think of it like going to the mental gym, that your muscles, your mental muscles, are directed at solving other people's problems. And
Right.
Grant Westfield, their owners, were very keen that we should come up with our own products. And I quite quickly discovered that that's a different set of mental muscles.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder to come up with your own product than for answer somebody else's question, if that's what you've been doing for your whole life.
Yeah.
But we were very much helped into that because we had developed a washroom system and we had built prototypes in our studio. And an architect came in one day and he looked at the whole system, and we had to create a kind of secret panel which could be removed so that you could get to some tools to access a component in the washroom. And he looked at the whole system. He said, "I really like your whole system, but I really don't like those fixings you've used." And you will have seen them. They're the metal finger plates that slide together like that. And I looked at them and I thought, he's right. Those things have got 8 screws in them, 4 either side. They don't line up very well. They're horrible to mark out. And he has a real point. And as he left, I remember the moment that as the door closed, as he left, I turned to my business partner and said, "That's a good problem." And that started ButtonFix. Let's do our own. So we went to the high net worth individual who happened to be our client as well. And we did a deal with him where he put the money in and we put the sweat equity in. And that started ButtonFix. And latterly, we bought him out. And he doesn't own the shares anymore. We do. So, but that question, a good problem, a good problem is worth its weight in gold. And that's a very hard thing to find now because so many things have been designed. But that was, we found a good problem.
No, that makes sense, because I remember, even just, I went to architecture school, and one of the things that drove me crazy before I went, I would tell people, yeah, I think I want to be an architect. And they would say, oh, have you designed your own house? And there's this idea of design that people have that don't do design of like all we do is spend our time white paper designing things.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like, oh yeah, just design a house with no site, no context, no problem to solve. And I'm like, that's not interesting. Like anybody can do that.
Or even possible.
And
Well,
well, yeah, it's not impossible. Yeah, like what are you designing? And then we would have these studio projects like that in architecture school that was like, oh yeah, here's your site, just design. And it's like, no, I need a problem to solve. Like, why am I doing this? Who is the customer? What are the constraints? Like, to me, like remodels in this world of architecture, remodels are always much more interesting than new construction for that reason to me, because it's like, hey, you need limits, you need something difficult to solve around, and that inspires the solution itself.
of course.
So I think that is very interesting with the idea of product design as well. Is like, okay, you're solving a problem, and in reality, any good business is the same thing. You have a problem that needs to be solved by a service you provide or something like that. So,
well, much earlier in my career, when I left college, actually, I met a guy who was an older designer, and I said to him, "How does it work?" And he said, "Well, consultancy's feast and famine." But this was a guy who had invented and designed and made the plug covers that stop children putting their fingers in the electric sockets. And he said, "I own the tooling for that. And every morning I come into the office to do some design work for other people. But the fax machine, it was back in the days of fax machines. He said the fax machine would go and the company would order another 10,000. And he said that pays all the overheads." And I thought, actually, that's a pretty good idea. Maybe one day I'll do that. And in a way, that's what ButtonFix is.
yeah, I mean, it's you've solved a problem that has a continued need. And so on that note, then that's what ButtonFix is to you. So I assume that what that means is it has opened up and in ways funded other more interesting things.
Actually, it's become successful. So it's actually kind of eclipsed a lot of other design work now. I mean, I am doing some work at the moment, but it's kind of innovation and invention down to just the level of sketch. So we've been commissioned to think about something for somebody, and I'm very interested in the whole thinking process. So we're thinking about it and sketching it down, but I don't have to do loads of CAD work. We just hand over the concept, and they'll do all the donkey work. But we have to do the I call it the cream off the milk. So we have to do the cream. Somebody else does the milk.
Okay.
But ButtonFix is kind of taken over my life, really.
So we've talked about it a lot, ButtonFix, or referenced it. For those that are listening that maybe have never seen or heard of ButtonFix, could you describe, what is ButtonFix? What are the products that you guys offer, and what problem does it solve?
So you won't see our products because they're invisible. They're hidden. And the idea is that you take a panel and you want to put it on a wall or a ceiling. You could take an acoustic panel. You could take a washroom panel. I mean, it's surprising that when you start to look around you, how many areas are paneled. And so they're decorative panels in a hotel, a headboard even. So lots of panels out there in the world, and you don't want to see screws going through them or nails going through them or even gluing them to the wall. And you might actually want to take them off to replace them, repair them, or get access to services behind the panel. So the application is global. It's what you call an axiomatic problem. It appears all over the world. And so the world is literally our oyster in this respect. And the products are very simple. I can hold almost all of the products in one hand for our company. And in fact, things like, that's the size of the scale of the product. And I'll show you them as we go forward. But they're injection moldings mostly. There's a metal version. And they hold a panel on the wall very firmly, discreetly, and they're fast to put up, and they're economical to buy. In fact, I say they cost less than free because they save you in time on site. more than they cost you in the small amount of money that they cost each. So they work from an economical point of view. But like you, working with an architectural practice, I've learned two things about architects. One is they all want to be product designers. Yeah, you know that's true. The other thing you learn about architects is they never want to specify a product which will bite them later. So they want a product which is overspecified and very strong. And that's exactly what we did. We designed products that are so strong, the screws will rip out of the substrate before our product breaks. And that took a lot of polymer research and thinking and careful design. So if you design your own products, no client is paying you. So we've had some very economical, shall I say, rather than mean clients in our lives, in our working lives. And when you do it for yourself, you spend a lot more time on it than you would be paid for as a consultant. So some of these products take 2 to 3 years to develop, but the goal is to get them right, and that's not an easy thing to do. Anyway, so they're panel fixing, simple as that. They take the place of aluminium Z-clips. They take the place of what some people call a Dutch cleat, or what's the other word for a Dutch cleat?
French cleat.
Sorry,
like we call
a
it
split
French
batten. A split batten.
Okay.
Yeah, so they take the place of those. They do the job better. They take up less space, and it's a better way of doing the job, really.
And then within that, you have right now, I think, type 1, type 2, type 3.
Yeah.
And so the original, I assume, is type 1.
Type 1 is, this one's actually screwed to some acrylic. So this one, actually, I made this little thing to show somebody they could put an M5 bolt through it because they wanted to tap into a substrate. So I think it'll take a number 10 screw in imperial language, number 5 in metric. So you can screw that to this part's called the fix, and that's the button, hence the term ButtonFix. And these are made from glass-filled nylon, incredibly strong material. So if you've ever opened a Ford car door handle, that's the kind of material they use, and that's past the Alaska Death Valley test. So you're dealing with a really tough material. And they break, the test results show that they break round about, I think one of these will break at 300 kilos, which is, I don't know what that is in pounds, a lot. Far more than it requires to pull the screws out anyway.
So type 1, that one you're showing right here,
Type
you've
1.
got a button, you've got a fix, and it's basically parallel surface to surface.
That is. Right? So these are going surface to surface, and they click when they go home, which is very satisfying when you're putting a panel on the wall. You want to know it's gone to the right place.
Yeah.
So that's.
And I think you also have different buttons for different.
We do. So
tensions.
I'll carry on through them. The next one we did wasn't another type 1, it was a type 2. And this one I've attached the marker tool. So this marker tool tells you exactly where to put the screws for the fix. So black components, the fix. The blue one is a bigger button, so it helps guide it in when you've got this screwed to a side plate. So if you had a side plate of a piece of furniture, you would screw it to there, and then you could put your fascia panel on the front and it would click home. That's made from pure nylon because you want the flex in the jaws, whereas glass-filled nylon tends not to flex. So this marker plate then pops off, and it's rather toy-like. I quite like that it's rather toy-like, but it does the job very precisely, and there is no need to use a ruler or a pencil. So because those, I don't know if you can see them, but there are little metal spikes on the edge on there that mark across onto the panel. So that was the second one. Then we found out that people were taking these ones and they were flushing them into the timber, completely flush. So we made that simpler by doing what we call type 1 flush. So that is intended to be buried completely into the surface of the material. Or you can surface mount it. Or you can do anything in between surface mounting. So the gap you get between the two panels can be 8 millimeters, or what's 8 millimeters? About 3/8 of an inch, down to 0. So that
could be put with a CNC or
absolutely
a manual router or chisel or whatever.
What we discovered was that the products that were in the marketplace at the time we did these were never designed at the age of CNC. So making it CNC easy. Now, one of the things you can do with these is that the collar around here, you can recess it. So on the one hand, if you surface mount it like that, you get a 3/8 gap. And if you recess this into the material by turning it round, so whir this round the other way, you can put that in so that the material comes up to the back of here, and that gives you a 3 millimeter gap or 1/8 of an inch gap. So you've got a choice with that. So the collar actually gives you more strength in the vertical plane. And it turns out that there are no agreed international standards for these kinds of products. So we created our own, and we sent all the things off to a test house. So a specifier can refer to those and be comforted that our products will exceed the strength of the screws. And also it depends on the substrate. So it depends what you're screwing into, which we can't control. And we certainly don't supply screws with our products, because if we did, it would require what's called a CE mark, because it becomes a system. So we let other people buy that. So we did that. And then somebody wanted to put glass panels that you could write on that were backed up with a zinc-plated steel backplate. And so we developed these, which are bonded on. And we had a test done with those, and we used a specific glue to glue ABS to zinc, and incredible test results. I forget what the breaking strain was, but it was way more than was required. And it was that they were specifically aimed at American universities for that particular product. And this is now
fix can be epoxied or glued onto a surface.
You can, but we always say is we don't know what your substrate is. So talk to your glue supplier and ask them how to glue ABS to your product. What you don't want to do is get glue up inside this space here. And again, if you've got, this is very good for very thin materials. But again, if it's thicker, you can turn it around and bury that collar into the surface. Right. All these things are described on our website, button-fix.com. So there are videos showing how all those things work. And then, I don't know if you heard about it, but in London, there was a building called Grenfell, and it caught fire and many people died. It was like a towering inferno. It was actually a real towering inferno. And lots of the architects became much more concerned about fire risk. And there was a horrible incident where some firemen went into a building, and the plastic plugs that went into the wall that held the cables up in the wall melted, and the cables tangled around the firemen. So, you can see that the concern about fire and safety was greatly elevated. As it turns out, our products melt at around 400 degrees centigrade, whatever that is in Fahrenheit. And generally speaking, if our products reach that temperature, everybody the other side of that panel is already long gone. So technically it isn't a problem, but in order to solve that, we designed these, which are type 1 metal, very similar to the type 1 flush in some ways and type 1, but it's made of zinc, and that gets around lots of the fire officers' problems when they have a fire concern. So this one is also...
Because I've had jobs where we've had to do like lobby wall panels, and they required fire-rated panels.
Yeah.
And so this would also be considered a fire-rated attachment?
We can't get a fire rating in the UK, certainly, and in fact anywhere, because you have to test an entire system. So you have to have the panel, the substrate, and the fixing tested. We have just had that done with a fire door company. And interestingly, they used the plastic fixings, and they didn't melt, but it passed the 1 hour and 10 minutes test. Incredible. So this one, we specifically wanted to know if it was good for vibration, because we had a Californian company ask if it was earthquake proof. So we took it to a company that do the vibration mounts for the Eurofighter, and they have their own test house. So we put two 2-foot square panels of plywood with 4 of these on, and they vibrated it through all the frequencies. It just didn't do anything. So then they shock loaded it, and shock loading is measured in G-force. And you'll have seen, when you see Top Gun, a fighter pilot on Top Gun would experience about 3, maybe 4G, maybe 5G on a very tight turn. Well, we were north of 5G, and the guy asked me if I wanted to carry on. And he carried on, and the machine was getting very hot. And he said, "You sure you want to carry on?" I said, "I want to carry on till it breaks." And it broke at 15G. He said, "You're dead." So it's I think we've got an earthquake-proof product there. So good for things like paneling in transport. So if you're going over a bumpy road, this is a good one. And the latest one is type 3. So, by the way, I didn't show you that. The marker tool for all of the type 1s and the type 3 is this one. And it's a metal spike that just clips in, and it marks where the screws go for the button in that instance. And this one is type 3. So this comes out of a strange thing. My business partner, who's terribly clever, he went to Cambridge University, Imperial College, and the Royal College. So his father was a nuclear physicist, and his mother was a mathematician. So he's a clever guy. And he said to me, "I am disappointed that Type 2 is one of our biggest sellers because it's the simplest product we do." And I said, "There's a clue in that. Let's do another simple product." So this is the next simple product. This did take 3 years to get right, but 3 holes screws incredibly well to that's PET acoustic materials, which I know is used a lot in the States. So you can put 3 screws in that. I mean, it can be any material, but I really like that it works with PET. Ignore these 4 buttons. That's the type 3 button. Put the 2 together, and they've got a really nice snap the way they go together. But getting that snap right was very, very difficult because we needed the right polymers to work. We needed it to go on easier than it is to come off. And up to 2 weeks before launch, it still wasn't right. It was very tough. But then at the very last minute, my technical manager, Philip Hall, got it right. And I was very pleased with that, very pleased. So that's our latest product.
It's a zero liftoff solution. It just pushes right in.
You push it straight on. There's no these ones, all the type 1s need to move by 15 millimeters, which is about that much. What's that, about 5/8 of an inch, something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Any questions?
No, I think that's phenomenal. So now you have 3 types with variations in between, and you basically can put panels parallel, face to face, perpendicular.
Yep.
And really with the type 2, even at various angles adjacent to that perpendicular. So that would be like, for people listening, you can hang panels face to face on a wall. You could put apron panels or vanity, like bathroom plumbing panels or things like that, as well as now with the type 3, just flush, snap in if you don't have any clearance for lift off.
And type 3 is actually good for ceiling panels. It's strong enough to do that. We have a distributor in Turkey that has just sold a lot of them to a company doing ceilings, plywood ceilings. And they just snap up, and they snap up really strongly. And we have test results for that. This is you mentioned other buttons. This isn't a big seller, but it's designed for Euro screws, the kind of
Okay.
screws you go into chipboard. So has a special countersink.
Awesome. So, this has been a journey. How long ago did you release the original ButtonFix?
13 years.
13 years. Okay. Yeah. And so in that 13 years, you've developed these series of, product. You mentioned that Type 2 was your best seller, and because in your mind, it was simpler than Type 1.
Well, my colleagues have just come back from visiting your very large country, and they said they've had a much greater insight into the marketplace now. And they said the reason that Type 2 is the biggest seller in America is that people haven't really looked at how else they could use our products, which is very interesting. If you've got there's one particular big user in the States, and they just use it for one thing. So what's fascinating to me is that you have to sit down with people and explain to them, look, you can do these things with it. I think one of the big faults with creative people is that you believe that other people can imagine like you can imagine. And actually, they can't. And why should they? You need to really show people how to use a product.
Yeah. No, it is interesting to me, being here in the States, because still to this day, Z-clips are ubiquitous, right? Like everybody still uses Z-clips, or everybody still uses even French cleats, or different types of hang cleats, wood cleats, right? And I will still go to shops to this day that they will still swear, oh, it's simpler because they're used to it.
Yeah.
Like that's just the solution. It's just a given solution. And they don't realize, hey, there's other products out there. There's other better products out there that, yes, you have to change the way you work a little bit, but there's more possibilities with it. And like you said, even I've used different fixings like this, because constantly in reception desks, like nobody wants to see the fasteners. And you do have to be a little bit creative, but constantly, I think, our benchmen, the guys who are fabricating, a lot of times will say, oh, well, I'll use a dowel, or I'll use a concealed screw, or I'll post laminate over the fasteners. Like they have kind of these things that they're used to doing, and they don't realize, they don't use creativity of like, oh, I have now some new tools in the chest that I could take advantage of.
You touch on a very important thing there, which is that in both medical devices, interestingly, and timber work, they are both apprenticeship systems. And if you're an apprentice to a master, and the master has told you to do it that way, you don't question it. You don't have to think for yourself. You just do what the master tells you. And I think one of the and the timber world is very conservative. So one of the challenges is, dare you be different and do it a different, smarter way. And the thing is that when people do it a different and smarter way, they never go back. That is their new metric for how they should do that. So that their conservatism then plays to us rather than against us.
The other thing I always found interesting about products like ButtonFix and solutions versus, so in the world of millwork, I come from where I was an engineer and managing engineers. And so we were always trying to design ahead of time, engineer ahead of time how this product was going to be assembled and fastened and produced. And so my goal as an engineer in woodworking was, as much as possible, can I do all of the machining, as much of it to where it comes off of a CNC or comes off of a saw or comes out ready to go together, like an IKEA. And because it's easier for me to tell a machine what to do than it is to communicate to an assembler, hey, you need to grab a drill or you need to cut this part. Like the more steps there are manually, the more variability there is in the outcome.
Yeah.
And so using something like this, if I can tell a machine, okay, I need you to route in this type 2 fixing flush here, or a type 1 fixing flush here, and I need you to drill this hole here on this other part,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to mean they're going to mate together perfectly because I engineered it that way. As opposed to if I have to tell an operator, hey, you're going to have to get these, and you're going to have to measure where to put the Z-clip, and then you're going to have to make sure that they align perfectly, like, there yields a lot more variability in the results. And also then you have to deal with the operator who may say, oh, well, I want to change that out with this other solution that I
I'm glad
prefer.
you said that, because we had a big struggle at the beginning. Do you build in adjustment, or do you go for absolute precision? And it's marginal. At the end of
Right.
the day, we decided to go for absolute precision,
Yep.
because adjustability means there's 1,000 ways to get it wrong,
Yep.
whereas precise means there's one way,
Yep.
and we went for precise.
Yeah. And in some ways you have the adjustability before you choose it, but with the locators, right? It's okay. For example, if I am locating the screws in the field or the button or the fixing, right? That locator tells you exactly where the screw is once you
I
eliminated
love
all the
this difference in
variability.
language. You call it a locator, we call it a marker tool. But I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, and that's funny because even here in the U.S. we have a lot of that regional language that we struggle with.
And you call it a
Um,
hanger, which
yeah,
is great. We have to learn to speak your language. We always say here that English and American is a two nations separated by one language.
yes, yes, it is. It's very interesting, But I think that this is part of why, maybe it's because of my architecture background, and like you said, architects love to be fancy themselves product designers, right? And I think though that we don't in our industry, millwork, woodworking, right? I've always said we're kind of a decade behind everybody else from a technology standpoint, from an adoption standpoint, and even from a product design standpoint. Like, we don't have elegant products designed for us. They're very utilitarian and very, like, just good enough to get the job done. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, now it's good. Like, we're still using, and I don't want to knock on extruded aluminum products. There's a time and a place for them, and they do have their own benefits.
Mm-hmm.
But um, I mean, the generic Z clip for me has always driven me crazy because there's an inherent amount of variability. Like, it's loose, it's sloppy, and it's not exact,
And
and there is a
woodworkers
certain
don't
amount of
like
precision.
metal dust on site.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, we've just had a drawing through where a ceiling was going to be put up with Z clips, and they said, no, we want to use your product. And interestingly, a length of aluminium extrusion is actually very expensive. Although this one is 5 times the price of our plastic ones, uh, it's still cheaper than a Z clip, a lot cheaper. Um, and I remember going to a mill in New York, and I went to the comfort, to cover a comfort break. And as I walked back, I walked past the drawing office, which was full of drawing boards, not CAD systems. And two of the old guys said, yeah, but it's plastic. But one of the young engineers said, yeah, but that plastic is a very high performance plastic, and it's stronger than most of your metals. And that was really interesting to see that you have to overcome the prejudice that it's plastic. And then when you read the test results, they're independent test results. We didn't test them. These things break at a very high loading. But they will, of course, everything will break. But nowhere, you could hang one 8 foot by 4 foot, 3/4 inch plywood panel on one of our fixings, on one fixing. I mean, it wouldn't be any use to you, but it would carry the load.
Something else I don't know if you have this, I'm sure you do, but I've had to do a lot of like MRI rooms in the past that you have to have all non-ferrous
Oh, yeah.
fasteners and materials and stuff. And I would imagine you can use stainless screws with a button in your fixings.
Use what screws? Stainless.
Stainless steel.
You could, and as long as it's non-ferric. Yeah. Yeah, of
Yep.
course you could. Yes, of course you could. I hadn't thought about that, but quite often they need to seal between the panels in those kind of environments too.
Yep.
So, yes, you could do that. You're quite right. MRI scanners that have a massive magnetic field. Mm.
Yeah. So that's was always a struggle for us within those rooms. We would have to get stainless steel Euro hinges, I think
Mm.
Salice makes, and
Mm.
but always
Interesting.
finding types of fasteners that would work for that. And um, well, um,
You've
I
got
don't know if anybody. Sorry.
so you've got other questions, I notice.
Well, I do, yes, and I know we're coming along, but for me, like this is exciting. Just personally, picking your brain and talking about product design, I could do this for hours. But for our listeners, I'm curious to get your perspective on a couple things. One, we've talked a lot about the advancements and kind of from my perspective how our industry a lot of times is behind the times. From your perspective, what are some changes or advancements you've observed in the millwork, the woodworking industry over the years that you've been involved with it?
Well, as I said, I started off on a drawing board in a drawing office for plastic products and drawing the head shell for a hi-fi system, for example, for a record deck. And there was one guy there who was learning CAD, and this was very early on. And of course, CAD has taken over the world, and you still have a problem that it's hard to get a sense of scale in CAD. And now we've got AI. And I think there's a very, very interesting psychological problem approaching particularly creative people. Because if you take an artist or an architect or a product designer, right now, they look at the problem, they take ownership of the problem. It could be their problem or somebody else's problem, and they solve it. And then that solution, in many respects, whether they are aware of it or not, or even if it's their ego, they own the problem and they own the answer. Now, I predict that AI will change that quite dramatically, so that you will put in a prompt and you will get an answer, but the answer won't belong to you. And that non-ownership of the answer is going to be a hard pill to swallow. And you can already see it. There was a bridge built over a canal in Holland that was programmed for several robots to make a bridge, and they used AI and finite element analysis and lots of other and organic algorithms, and this thing built the bridge to its design. And I find that an interesting psychological time bomb that's going to go off quite quickly. So that I see that change coming. I also see another negative thing, actually, which is that I used to be chairman of the Art Workers Guild. And we had a lecture there one day by Sir Christopher Frayling. And he said that 40% of all making courses in Britain had been killed off by the present government. And that means that people out there don't have an understanding how things are made. And I feel very strongly that even if what you're doing is programming your computer or your AI or your CNC machine, you should know when it comes off the machine that it's right. And rightness has been a big issue for me, getting things right. I could go into that for hours, but and I could tell you why. But if you don't train people how to make things, you've got a real problem. And I fear for our young people coming out of schools that due to health and safety, they're not allowed to use a particular machine, or they haven't used the machine at all, or there are no workshops. In fact, I taught at North Carolina, UNCG, for a month. And they said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want the students to make the prototypes of the ideas they come up with. And they said, well, we have a big space, but we have no tools or machinery. So they sent me down to, is it Sears or Sears and Roebuck? Sears. They sent me to Sears with a blank check, and the guy was delighted to see me. So I just filled up a wheelbarrow with all the tools I needed. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed that, and came back, and the students and I made things, which is very, very important.
No, absolutely. That's been a big problem here in the U.S. as well. And I remember actually when I was in architecture school that I was very jaded by the end of my 4 years because it was all intellectual, right? And not hands-on. And my last semester, we had a new professor that came in that brought in design build, and we made kinetic sculpture, and we actually had to solve a real problem with our hands, with welding, with woodworking, and how can we make something, and that totally reinvigorated my passion for,
of course,
for architecture.
Yeah, it's so important. It's also important for young people's mental health. If they make something, the brilliant thing about making something is that you are in control of something. And if you're in control of it, it grounds you mentally. And I think that would cure a lot of the current mental problems that young people have.
Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, you've shared a little bit about what you see coming in the future with it related to AI. What changes do you anticipate within our industry, millwork and manufacturing, over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well,
especially considering product design and innovation.
Yeah, I mean, you've got external forces on the marketplace, like China, for example. And I think we have been weakened by relying upon cheaper products being made in other countries. I mean, we export our products. We export our products to 34 countries now, and we just got the King's Award for international trade and the Queen's Award for innovation. But seeing how other countries are doing things more economically, because they have cheaper labour rates, that's a big problem for our industry, I think. That's a really big problem. I don't know how it is in the States, to be frank with you, but here you see people incentivized to try and drive the price down, but they're not driving the quality up necessarily. And then that ends up in a big problem like that big fire I was telling you about, where people did the job on the cheap, but they didn't take care of that problem because it cost more money. I'm not sure. To be frank, I'm not in the world of millwork in the sense that you are. We provide a product that solves a particular problem for mill workers, makes their life easier, and they, when they look at it and they use it, they really like it. That's kind of all I'm really worried about now. So I don't have as much of a handle on it as you would, as a kind of overseer of all the other things going on. So you've got a better, basically I'm saying you've got a better idea of it than I do.
No, I think what you have is an interesting insight, because I do find a lot of times people that are in it every day, I think a lot of times are blinded to innovation or opportunities. And so it's always interesting to me to get a unique perspective as yours of like, okay, what's happening at a larger scale in the world. You talked about AI and things happening, because a lot of times that's really the way the larger world goes, is the way kind of our piece of it eventually adapts to.
Yeah, exactly. We skipped one of your questions, which is about advice I've learned through the years. Do you want me to quickly cover that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I mean, I will, but
shared pieces,
that
but yeah, absolutely. What lessons and advice do you have learned about product design?
When I was 18, I met a German philosopher who happened to be a customer who wanted me to design an exhibition stand. That I won't go into. But he said to me, be in awe of what you don't know, because it's infinitely bigger than you'll ever know. And I've carried that with me. That it doesn't matter how much you know, there's an infinite amount you don't know. And that's a very important place to start. If you concede that you don't know, that's a fantastically powerful place to be, because it means that you can know. And I often have clients who say, do you know how to do this? And I say, well, I don't actually. I don't know how to do it. But if you want me to do innovation, no one knows how to do it, this particular problem. But the thing I can do is I know how to know. And that I find very interesting. Occam's razor. I don't know if you've come across Occam's razor. It's do things the simplest possible way. And that is hard. Simple is not easy. I think that the design is a 24/7 activity, including when you're asleep. Let's say, for example, behind me on the wall here is the periodic table. And the Russian chemist Mendeleev came up with that, but he did it when he was half asleep. So was the benzene ring discovered that way. So did Paul McCartney do it. In fact, I dreamt a whole branch of geometry and put it down and mathematicians have proved it. I don't understand the maths, but when you're asleep, you plug into a different kind of thinking. So I think that's actually very important. And teamwork. And I love teamwork because when you have an idea, trying to do it yourself is way too hard. Doing it within a group of people, using the rule, it was a rather ugly rule. I call it this or better. So I might say, well, how about this, guys? But I don't mind if you do it better. I don't mind being completely wrong, but make it better. And that's very important. Make it better. And I think that's a kind of Elon Musk way of thinking, actually. Just do it better. And that really helps me. I love doing it that way. Sorry, I digress, but that's...
No, that's amazing. That's great insight. And I think that helps a lot, especially in the idea of teamwork and remaining open to anything that's better.
Yeah. And work with that, so that can be hard for some people.
It reminds me of improv comedy. There's this idea of you never say no. It's always yes and, or like, okay, if you're doing improvisational comedy with another comedian or another actor, and they throw an idea out to you, and you never reject the idea. You always take it and run with it and add to it. I think that's very much the idea you just shared of, okay, this or better.
I think in the design world, there's a lot of people out there with ego issues, and they want it to be their idea that gets through. And I don't have that problem at all. I don't like it. I'd much rather I might have the initial idea, but then it gets mutated and worked on and evolved, and eventually you end up in a good place. And it's the gestalt of the group that owns the idea, not you.
Yeah. I find a lot of times, especially it seems like in the engineering world, it's a lot of like, well, I've spent a lot of time or effort in this solution, so now I need to justify that this solution is worth keeping, as opposed to, did that solution maybe spark something better? Run with the better.
Well, I always think a project, I want to know actually from you whether you agree with this, but I've always described projects like a clock face. And you start off at 12 o'clock with a great idea. You bring your experience to work on it through 3 o'clock. And then when you get to 6 o'clock, you've got your head in your hands. And I call that the dark night of the soul, when it's gone wrong on every possible level. And then you keep working on it. And around about 9 o'clock, it's competent. And the client would probably accept it at that point. But if you carry on between 9 o'clock and midnight, you get excellence. And it's that last quadrant, which might take 5 minutes or 5 years. But that is where the magic is, that last quadrant. And I've talked to lots of people about that, and they quite often agree with me. That happens on the projects.
No, absolutely. I think that I've never thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. And I would venture to say that tons of people are at 1 and 2. Like, it's very common, and I've heard lots of people, oh yeah, I'm going to create this app, or I'm going to create this product. They have like the beginnings of an idea, but no solution. And I think a lot of people think, product design or anything like that is that simple. It's like, oh, it's just ideas. And no, it's actually carrying those things through and creating the solution. And I think a lot of people then, it'd be interesting to see what you would think a scatter plot of how many people stop at what point around the clock.
Well, you might choose to stop at a certain point on the clock, like this thing we've just been doing, where they're just bringing us in as, what they're calling it parachuting the creative team in. They do that, and then we come out again. So you can choose to stop and let somebody else do the rest of the clock face. But I don't think many people go from what you guys call soup to nuts.
Yep.
So, and I think ButtonFix is that, from a point of view of having an idea, taking it through to product development, doing the manufacturing, doing the exporting, doing the financing, figuring out how to distribute through different distributors around the world. Not many product designers actually do all of that journey. I found that incredibly educational, because you're literally at the interface of what you don't know all the time.
Tony, those are some great insights, some amazing advice. I'm honored that you took time out to speak with me. I've learned a lot in this, and I'm in awe of the work that you've done over your career and what you've shared with me today.
Well, thank you.
If anybody is interested in finding out more about ButtonFix or Tony, what's the best way for them to
Tony at
contact
button-fix.com. Or on our website, there's a thing called Talk down in the bottom right-hand corner, and that is used for people with technical questions, which get answered by real people, not a robot. Maybe offline, but most of the time it's online. And we like helping people. One of the things we realized was that good customer care is the low-hanging fruit, and nobody does it anymore. Absolutely. So we give a terrific, even if people are buying 4 of them, we give them half an hour sometimes. It's crazy, but they become our champions.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I will link all those in the show notes, so it's easy for you, if you're listening to this, to go and send an email or jump to the ButtonFix website. Thank you again so much for taking time out to talk and share with my audience today.
And that's great. Thank you so much, too, for having me on. I really enjoyed that. Very pleasurable.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.